tiny bit of background. I did my PhD and BSc back in England, went over to the States for 8.5 years, working at Cornell, Washington State, and then as a consultant in Montana. And kind of began in this area when I was at Cornell. I went over to analyze milk fatty acids, and I soon began doing things like carbon footprint, land use, and water use, and found it became this passion of mine. So if you have the misfortune to sit next to me in a taxi or on a bus or on a plane or something, I'm probably going to talk about it at some point. But that's worked rather nicely because it seems that the rest of the world are beginning to think about this as well. And I certainly think that all of us in the dairy industry, no matter where we're based globally, are beginning to have to think about this more and more and more and more. But perhaps my main message to you, regardless of what size your farm is, regardless of what breed it is, here we've got a Jersey calf in Australia about 4 or 5 years ago now. Doesn't matter how big your farm is, how small your farm is, where you're based, what breed you have, any dairy production system can be and should be sustainable. So as I say, dairy calves or cattle outside grazing in Norway, Jersey cattle on a university farm in Ohio in the States, or housed Holstein Friesian cows again in the States. Any dairy production system can be and should be sustainable. Doesn't matter if you've got 50 cows or 5,000 cows. Doesn't matter whether you're in Ireland or Australia or South Africa. But the key to doing that is balancing 3 components: economic viability, environmental responsibility, and social acceptability. And I'm going to touch on all 3 of those in this presentation, mainly on the environmental side and the social side. As a total data nerd, I can do the economics, but I'm not really an economic person, as it were. But there is a really strong correlation, a really strong tie between economic viability and environmental responsibility, in that if we become more efficient, more productive every single day, we're going to use less land, less water, less carbon, and have a positive economic impact as well. So if you bear that in mind. But in the second part of my presentation, I'm going to talk more about the social aspects, because ultimately, if we don't have a market, if we don't have that social acceptability there from the consumer, then we won't have a dairy industry in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. So I'm going to move away from cows just for 1 second. I'm going to ask you a question, and I appreciate it's mid-morning, so hopefully we're all fairly awake, we've had a coffee. But I want to compare 2 vehicles here, Vehicle 1 and Vehicle 2. Because we all hear about carbon and fuel emissions and mileage and efficiency, so we're simply going to compare these 2 vehicles to see which we think has the higher carbon footprint. So they both burn some fuel over 5 hours. Vehicle 1 burns 265 litres of fuel, Vehicle 2 burns 38, and they both travel the same distance, 563 kilometres. So that means on a kilometre per litre basis, Vehicle 1 gets 2.1, Vehicle 2 gets 14.8. Based on nothing else other than what I've told you, which of those has a higher carbon footprint? The one that gets 2.1 kilometres per litre, or the one that gets 14.8 kilometres per litre? Which one's better? Which one's the one you're going to buy? Number 2, absolutely. More miles per gallon, more kilometres per litre. It seems obvious, right? Except the point of transport is to move things, people or apples or milk or cows. So we can't just look at it from a fuel per distance point of view. We've got to look at it as a product moved over a certain distance with that amount of fuel basis. So Vehicle 1 looks, quite frankly, pretty crap, but it carries 50 passengers. Vehicle 2 looks pretty good, but it only carries 4. We've got to look at it on a people kilometres per litre basis. So if we do that, Vehicle 1 gets 28,000, Vehicle 2 gets 2,252. So on a people kilometres per litre basis, it suddenly looks very, very different. 106 people kilometres per litre for Vehicle 1, 59 for Vehicle 2. So not surprisingly, number 1 is a bus, number 2 is a car. And that turns on its head that perception that we often have, that efficiency based on metric A is really, really important. We've got to look at the whole system. We've got to look at the purpose of this. So ultimately, as a dairy industry, we don't just look at it per cow. If we look at it per cow, we're effectively looking at the car, as opposed to per industry on a dairy basis. So we have to look at it per kilo of milk, or butter, or ice cream, or cheese, not per cow. And I know in Australia at the moment they're having a carbon tax type thing on a per cow basis, regardless of whether that cow gives us 10 litres or 20 litres or 42 litres. We've got to look at it on an output basis, not simply on per animal, but how much dairy does that animal make per day, per year, per lifetime. So if we do that, I'm now going to take you back, and we're going back to 1944, and this is some data from the States. We published it back in the Journal of Animal Science back in 2009 now, and the purpose of the paper was to kind of dispel this myth that everything was better in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. The sun always shone, there were no carbon emissions, no greenhouse gases, everything was green and perfect and fabulous. To the consumer, they think that that's true every single day. They have this image of big, bad, technology-led farms. Everything was so much prettier back in 1950, 1940, 1960. So, in 1944, here we're comparing to 2007. The carbon footprint per cow has doubled over that time, and that's absolutely true. But that's because the cows now are bigger, they eat more, they belch more, but they also give us more milk per day. So again, we can't look at it per cow, because per cow, the carbon footprint has doubled. But as I say, as a dairy industry, the purpose is to make milk. And if we look at it in the graph on the right-hand side, per kilo of milk, the carbon footprint has come down by 2/3. And we've seen the same pattern in almost every developed dairy industry all over the world. As we improve productivity, as we improve efficiency every single day, the carbon footprint per kilo of milk or cheese or butter comes down. What that means is, over that time, the US dairy industry cut the total carbon footprint up until the farm gate by 41% over that time. If that had been done by Honda or Toyota or any other big company, that would be shouted about every single day. As a dairy industry, we have to do a better job of helping the consumer understand that we've made huge efficiency gains over time. So how have they done that? Well, ultimately, again, improving productivity per cow. The average milk yield per cow back in 1944 was just over 2,000 litres per cow per year. 2007, it was about 9,000 litres per cow per year. What that meant was, back in 1944, the national herd had 25.6 million cows and made 53 billion kilos of milk. 2007, they'd cut the cow numbers by 64%. They'd come down from 25.6 million to 9.2 million. But the total milk had gone up from 53 billion litres to 84 billion litres. So again, productivity, efficiency. This isn't because anybody in 1960, 1970, 1980 was thinking about the carbon footprint of the US dairy industry. And we're simply doing what dairy farmers globally do best, improving every single day, getting better at feeding cows, breeding cows, looking after cows so that those cows can be the most productive animals in that system. And as I say, we've seen the same pattern with almost every developed dairy industry. But as I said earlier, we've got to look at it on a whole system basis. So ultimately, when we look at absolutely everything that goes into making 1 litre of milk, from the making the pesticides, the herbicides, and the fertilizers to grow the crops, all the way through to the milk at the farm gate. So this does not include bottling, distribution, consumption, but up until the farm gate, because simply of those improvements in cow milk yield per day, in health, in management, in milk quality, and improvements that we've seen in terms of cropping yields over that time. Per kilo of milk in the States in 2007 compared to 1944, they only need 21% of the total animals, 23% of the feed, 35% of the water, 10% of the total land. And that's also because on a fairly whole-scale basis over that time, the industry moved from a pasture-based system to a more housed, intensive type system. 24% of the waste, and as I showed earlier, 63% in the carbon footprint per kilo of milk and a 41% decrease in the total industry carbon footprint. As I say, we've seen the same pattern in almost every developed dairy industry globally. Improved productivity over time leads to less land, less water, less carbon per kilo of milk. And that's becoming increasingly important as the retailers and the government and the restaurants are all thinking about their components of environmental impact. So this was some data that came out from the FAO. It came out 6 years ago now, which seems crazy. But they basically showed that on a global basis, as the milk yield goes up, the carbon footprint comes down. Or to put it the other way, as the milk yield comes down, the carbon footprint goes up. And that seems to hold for every single system. Obviously, there are those odd ones that don't fit, but on a general basis, if we improve the productivity, if we improve efficiency every single day, we see positive impacts in terms of carbon footprint, land use, water use. And as I said earlier, there's also a really positive link with the economics as well. And that's because of an effect we call a dilution of maintenance effect. So we basically have exactly the same cow here. This is based on a 681 kilo Holstein cow. But she either gives us 13.5 litres per day of milk, 20 litres per day, 35 litres per day, or 42.4 litres per day. And I apologise that the units seem kind of odd, but that's because it was converted from pounds, and it's about, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, something like that. So the point is, if we look at the darker bars, that's the total nutrient requirement in terms of energy just to maintain those cows. And the lighter green bars on top are the energy requirement per day per cow. Fairly obviously, as the milk yield per cow goes up, the total energy also goes up, right? It makes perfect sense. But what comes down is the proportion of the total daily energy required just to maintain that cow, just to keep that cow alive and functioning every day. So as milk yield increases, we go from over half of her total total daily energy being used just to keep her alive and functioning, down to just over a quarter. So we improve efficiency. And if we look at the yellow bars at the top, that means on a per litre of milk basis, the total energy comes down from 10.2 megajoules for the cow that gives us 13 litres per day, down to 6.4 megajoules for the cow that gives us 42 litres per day. Again, if we use less energy per litre of milk, that's going to also mean less land, less water, less carbon, and so on and so on. So if we look at it on a feed basis, again, if we increase the total milk yield per day, total feed goes up from 16.6 to 25.1, but the feed per litre comes down, 1.23 kilos per litre for the cow giving us 13.5 litres per day, down to 0.59 kilos per litre, because we've got that dilution of maintenance effect. And if we look at it in terms of feed costs, the feed cost data here is old, so don't quote it, but the slope is the same. Again, if we improve milk yield per cow, feed cost comes down as well. So we see this positive correlation between improving yields, improving productivity, using less land, less water, and having a more efficient system in terms of the economics. So we can clearly see that we see benefits in terms of improving yields. And if we do it on a whole system basis, this was part of a paper that we published back in 2012 now, which I'll come to in just a second. But if all we do is to improve milk yield by cow by 4.5 litres per cow per day, so that could be by improved mastitis control, lameness, better comfort, better feed, use of technologies, RBST, so on and so on. Anything that gives us an extra 4.5 litres of milk per cow per day cuts the total body mass of the herd to make a certain amount of milk by 90%. Effectively, we need fewer total cows to make the same amount of milk. We need 7% less feed per unit of milk. We need 10% less water per unit of milk, 6% less land per unit of milk, and we see an 8% decrease in the carbon footprint per unit of milk. Now, milk yield is kind of the obvious efficiency metric, as it were, but ultimately anything that we do to improve the productivity and the efficiency of our cows will confer these gains. And believe me, I could give you examples for hours and hours and hours and hours. But in terms of body weight, in terms of milk solids, reproduction, lameness, mastitis, any of these things that confer a drain on our efficiency, if we improve them so that all of our cows perform as well as they possibly can do, we'll see these type of gains. So as I say, we published a paper comparing Holsteins to Jerseys. This is back in 2012. And can I just say, Holsteins are fabulous and Jerseys are fabulous. And Ayrshires and Shorthorns. I have no breed bias. I may have more pictures of Jerseys in this PowerPoint because I tend to go to more Jersey farms, and Jerseys are kind of cute when you take pictures of them with calves, you know. But all breeds are good, okay? There is no Jersey is great, Holstein is bad here. All breeds are good. But we were asked to do this paper, and not surprisingly it was funded by some Jersey guys in the States, but also to show the impact of body weight, milk yield, and milk composition. Because it's fairly clear that if we improve milk yield per cow per day, we see gains. That makes sense, right? That's fairly obvious. But what's less obvious is what happens if we just improve milk fat or milk protein, or if we have a cow that makes the same amount of milk but weighs 10% less, 20% less, 30% less. Again, I could talk about this paper for hours and hours and hours and hours. But ultimately what we had was a Holstein cow, and this is from memory, but a Holstein cow giving 30 litres of milk per day. She was a 3.5 and 3.8 for protein and fat. And she weighed, doing the conversion, 680 or so kilos. Compared to a Jersey cow weighing 454 kilos, so she has a lower body weight. She also had a lower milk yield. She was down at about 20 litres of milk per day compared to 30 for the Holstein, but she had a higher protein and butter fat. She was at about a 4.2 fat and about a 3.8 protein, okay? So we've basically got the smaller Jersey cow, which is a benefit, giving it higher fat and protein, but with 1/3 less total milk per day compared to the Holstein. So quite honestly, we thought it would be pretty close. You know, there'd be like a 2% difference or a 5% difference. What really surprised us was per unit of cheese, this is, okay? So it's just not on a milk is milk basis, but per unit of cheese, a Jersey cow gives us a 12.5% cheese yield compared to a 10% cheese yield for the Holstein. So per unit of cheese, if we use Jerseys versus Holsteins, we need less milk because of the extra solids content, fairly obviously. We actually need more Jersey cows because of that 1/3 decrease in milk yield per cow. But the total body mass of the total herd comes down by 26% because even though we need more cows, they weigh 454 kilos versus 681 kilos for the Holstein. So what that means is per unit of cheese, we need 32% less water, 11% less land, and we see a 20% decrease in the carbon footprint. Again, I'm not here to say everybody should have Jerseys. Jerseys are great, but they also have behavioural issues sometimes. But it goes to show we can't just look at milk yield per cow. There are lots of other factors as well in terms of productivity, in terms of efficiency that do affect land use, water use, carbon emissions, and so on. So to come to the social side, this is again some data from the States, but I've seen the same patterns absolutely everywhere. I was sent some data from the UK just about 3 weeks ago for a conference that I'm doing over there in about 3 weeks' time. And we see the same pattern globally. You know, people out there read the papers and they go on Facebook and Twitter and so on, and they honestly believe that most of our farms are corporate-owned factory farms. That there's some guy out there in an office for Corporation X telling all of you how to feed and breed and care for your cows every single day. So in this instance, 53% of US consumers think that most farms are large corporate-owned factory farms. Again, the data I'm going to show you is from the States, but again, we see the same picture almost everywhere. In the States, contrary to the image, over 3/4 of total farms have less than 100 dairy cows. So the average is actually about 48 cows in the States. Only 4.2% have more than 500 cows. Now, I know that that's in contrast to over here, because over here your average herd size is about 353 cows. But that also means you've got some guys with 50 cows and some guys with 800, 900, 1,000, and so on, so on. So generally, globally, we see this split. Lots of smaller type farms, and then a relatively small amount of very, very big farms. But in terms of the total milk, we see the opposite pattern. Most of the milk comes from those very, very big farms, with a smaller proportion of the total milk coming from the smaller type farms. So again, in contrast to this consumer image of these big factory type farms, most farms don't have that many cows, and they are still small family-led farms. And we have to help the consumer understand that, because they really don't get that message. And what we do know is that on a milk yield basis, as the farm gets bigger, generally milk yield per cow increases as well. And that's simply because of efficiencies. If you have a designated guy for feeding or breeding or calf care, you can get better over time. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a farm with 100 cows with very good milk yield per cow, but generally, as the farm gets bigger, as there's more scope for better technology, better efficiencies overall, generally milk yield per cow tends to go up. But again, we have the critics. This was an article from a paper in the UK called the Daily Mail, and it is frankly the most hateful, bigoted, nasty piece of junk you could ever read. I mean, they hate everybody. Basically, they hate everybody in the world. They particularly hate big farms. So we had a big farm plan. This is going back about 5 or 6 years ago now. There was a plan to have this farm down in the south east. And they were going to have 8,000 cows. And of course, they jumped on this factory farm, housing all these cows. Everybody knows it'll be awful and bad and terrible. I don't have the time to show you the data today, but there was a really good report that came out from Europe just about 6 months ago now, and they showed that on an individual cow basis, the welfare does not matter if it's a house cow or a pastured cow, and if it's in a big herd or a small herd. On an individual cow basis, herd size makes absolutely no difference to the individual cow welfare. They can be managed fabulously in a big herd or a small herd, on pasture or inside. They will have their individual different issues in a different system, but on a per cow basis, herd size or housing versus pasture does not affect animal welfare. But in the paper, it's this image of this terrible, huge factory that's going to be really, really bad. We also hear over and over again that as herds get bigger, they turn into factories, they cull their cows all the time, you know. Cows only last for half a lactation, 1 lactation, 2 lactations. This is again data from the States. I saw almost exactly the same pattern with some data from the UK just about 2 months ago. Herd size literally makes no difference. Culling rate in the small herds, which was less than 100 cows, 24.1%. Large herds, 500 plus cows, 23.4%. Culling rate is culling rate, and it really doesn't seem to make any difference whether you're a large herd or a small herd in terms of culling rate, unless obviously you're looking to downsize or upsize or so on and so on. But in the general trend, herd size isn't affected by culling rate. And there's also some really nice data that actually milk quality improves and SCC and total bacteria count comes down as the herd size goes up. Again, simply because you have time and management and staff to designate to milk quality issues, as opposed to trying to do everything with 2 guys, 3 goes, however many that might be. So ultimately, to use the cliche, size doesn't matter. You can be a fabulous 50-cow farmer, you can be a fabulous 5,000-cow farmer. It's about the management. It matters what you do with it, what you do with those cows, how you breed them, how you feed them every single day. Size per se does not matter in terms of cow welfare, culling rate. It does make a yield difference, but as I say, you can have a fabulous 100-cow herd just as you can have a fabulous 5,000-cow herd. And we have to help the consumer understand that. And I'm kind of proud to say that in my opinion, I've never been on a dairy factory farm. I've never been on a farm where that farmer treats his cows like robots or machines or things that don't eat and breathe and feel every single day. I've never been on such a farm, and we have to help the consumer to understand that we care for our animals, for the land, for the planet, for the community every single day, because they really don't get that at the moment. And this is exemplified by the protests out there. And we have these demonstrations, these posters from groups like PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, HSUS, which is the Humane Society of the United States. These guys have money, they have volunteers, they have lobbyists, they are very good at marketing, they understand a picture of Pamela Anderson in a bikini gets quite a lot of attention from, quite a lot of people, and they know the messages to get through to people. This demonstration at the top right here was in Washington, D.C. about 5 or 6 years ago. The same demonstration was in Bozeman, Montana, where I lived about 4 years ago. It's been all over the world, Germany, the UK, Italy, and so on, with the same message every time. 1 pound of meat, or 0.454 kilos of meat, equals 2,463 gallons of water. And I would convert gallons to litres in my head at this point, but I'm not that much of a nerd that I can do that. But the point is, that figure there is about 6 times too high, but that's never publicised. Nobody ever talks back and says, actually, this is complete rubbish. We've got to be stronger as an industry. We have to fight back with the tools and the figures and the data to say this isn't true. Because if any activist group applies data to things, then we think it must be true, because there's numbers there. And 2,463 gallons sounds like a precise, calculated figure. So that gains the consumer's trust. They think this must be true, and they see these 2 naked girls behind this kind of shower screen in the middle of the day, and they think, oh, that's a powerful message, there's 2 naked girls, but it's a powerful message. Perhaps I shouldn't have the beef or the dairy or the pork chop. Perhaps I should have the tofu or the veggie or the vegan option for dinner. So these groups are really, really, really clever. That brings me to Meatless Mondays, and I know that's over here just as it is, again, a global type issue. The basis being we can still drive our Hummers every single day, but if we go meatless on a Monday, we're going to save the planet. Everything's going to be great. It's highly promoted every Monday on the internet, in publications. Go meatless, it's easy, it's quick, it's healthy for you, so on and so on. Whether it's healthy for the 1 in 9 people that don't have enough food every single day, let alone enough high quality protein, is a whole new different question. But it's pushed out there every single Monday. But there's no science behind it. I found some data from over here from 2014 now that shows livestock production in this country only accounts for 5.6% of your total carbon footprint. So that means 94.4% comes from everything else. Trucking and industry and hotels and conferences and so on. Less than 6% of your total national carbon footprint comes from livestock. Now, most of that will be from beef and dairy, but still, it's only 5.6%. That's a relatively small percentage. But again, on a Monday, we're told over and over again, if everybody just went meat-free, dairy-free, life would be good. So let's picture what it looks like if all of us go meat-free every Monday for a whole year. It's going to have a huge impact, right? Except it's really not. The national carbon footprint would come down by less than 1% per year, even if everybody went meat and dairy-free every single Monday. It makes almost no difference whatsoever. And from a child's health, growth, nutrition point of view, that's going to have a huge impact on the millions of kids every single day who don't have access to high-quality meat and dairy. So we've got to get the message out to people, particularly people with kids, that this isn't the way to go if they want happy, healthy kids. Again, I don't have time to talk about it now, but there was a really nice paper that looked at supplementing school children in Kenya, came out about 4 or 5 years ago now, and they showed that their academic test scores improved if they were simply given extra milk or extra meat at school every day. So we have a huge role to play in terms of helping everybody's kids grow up better in the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years. And it does come down to, we should all have a choice. On any day of the week, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, we should have the choice of the beef, or the fish, or the veggie, or the vegan food. Part of the reason I can say that with some definiteness is that back when I was in high school, when I was about 15, I was vegan for 12 months. And I passionately thought that that was the way forward. I was going to save the world and save the animals, and everything was going to be great. And then I got to 16 and I started eating bacon again, and it hasn't lasted, obviously. And to be honest, I couldn't go back. But we should have that choice. When I was 15, I passionately wanted my vegan, dairy-free, meat-free, cheese-free, egg-free, honey-free, back in England at that point, kind of taste-free diet. We should all be able to choose whatever we want to eat every single day, providing it's available to us in terms of the economics and the market. But again, what the consumer often doesn't understand is we don't just get milk and meat from the cattle industry. Every single picture here has some ingredient from the cattle industry, whether it's gummy bears or perfume or dynamite. I have to change these pictures relatively soon because it's been pointed out to me. Let's see if I've got a highlighter here. But this picture here is getting less and less obvious as the audiences get younger and younger and younger. But even camera film has ingredients from the cattle industry. So what's the cost of getting all of these things if we don't have cows to give us those byproducts to make all of these products? And when we talk about byproducts, we can feed all of these things to cattle safely, efficiently every single day. We can feed them sunflower meal, we can feed them distillers' grains, we can feed them almond hulls. What happens to all of these things if we don't have a cattle industry? What are the impacts on water use and carbon emissions if they all go into landfill? What are the impacts there? So again, we have to help the consumer understand that we don't just have this cattle industry for milk, for meat. There are so many other things that come into play as well. It isn't just as simple as food. But again, to the consumer, they think about milk and they think about dairy. Then they go to the supermarket and they see almond juice and rice juice and soy juice and all the other milks that we see. Just because it's labelled milk, it doesn't mean it has the energy and the protein and the vitamin D and the vitamin A and the calcium and the phosphorus and all the other good things that dairy milk gives us every single day. But again, the consumer just sees all of these things as kind of interchangeable drinks or things that all have the same nutritional content. But I will give a huge amount of cash to anybody who can show me the teats on a soybean. It's not milk. Soy juice is fine. Rice juice, almond juice, it is not milk. There are no mammary glands on a soybean. But again, I've lost count of the people who say, well, we don't really do dairy now, but we do soy milk. And that's a completely different thing. It isn't dairy, it's just called milk for some marketing type reason. And from a nutritional point of view and from a greenhouse gas point of view, it's very different as well. So some really nice data. It came out of Denmark back in 2010 now, and they looked at two things. They looked at carbon emissions per drink, which is here, but they also looked at the nutrient density of those drinks. Now this doesn't include energy, okay, but it does include protein, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, etc. So dairy milk here provides 53.8% of the recommended nutrients for people in that country. So dairy is looking pretty good. Orange juice is okay, 17%, soy drinks 7.6, red wine down to 1.2, and unfortunately beer is down at 0 because it gives us energy, but that's kind of it in terms of the nutrients. Greenhouse gases, milk is in the middle really with 99 grams per gram. Red wine looks really bad, presumably because in this particular country they had to truck it in or fly it in or ship it in from France or somewhere else, you know. Soda and water, again, look pretty bad. So they did a ratio between the greenhouse gas emissions here and the nutrients here. Because ultimately it's not just about greenhouse gas emissions per kilo or per litre. Milk isn't milk if it's soy milk and rice milk and almond milk. So we have to think about it on how nutritious is this drink given the carbon emissions. And when we do that, milk looks really good. High numbers are good here. So milk, fabulous. Orange juice is okay, soy juice is okay, red wine again, sorry, beer, you know, pretty useless from a nutrient basis per carbon footprint. So again, it isn't enough to look at per cow or even per litre now. We've got to look at the things that that dairy gives us every single day in terms of feeding more people, keeping us healthy, keeping the 9.5 billion people that we're going to have on the planet in 2050 healthy. So we've got to think about all of those components as well. But then we come to hormones. And this was a billboard again in the States. I found the picture quite a long time ago now. And the text is kind of dark here, but it basically says RBST injected cows are the mother of all milkshakes. And the marketing person here obviously didn't quite understand that cows normally have one udder with 4 teats rather than 2 udders with 4 teats. But again, to the consumer, they see this and they go, oh my goodness, hormones are bad. Everyone knows that hormones are going to kill us. And effectively, hormones are going to kill us because we're made of hormones, but these hormones are not going to kill us, you know? But again, to the consumer, it's a negative type picture. And I have, quite frankly, lost count of the conversations that I've had with sensible, logical, rational people who say, well, we don't drink dairy anymore. And I kind of get a bit irritated and stand up a bit straighter and ask them why. Well, it's all the hormones in dairy. Those are the reasons that our kids are 8 foot tall by the time they're 3 and have breasts by the time they're 5. You know, it's just the hormones in the dairy. And it drives me insane every single time. So, being a data nerd, I did the calculations. But I also found this paper, and again, this is where I have to underline, all milk is good, all systems are good, everybody is good. But I've also been told we drink organic milk because there's no hormones in it. It comes from cows. Cows make hormones. Hormones go into milk. You know, organic milk or local milk or Ayrshire milk or any other milk, it all contains hormones. Every single food that we eat contains hormones, with the exception of sugar and salt. Everything else, from a cheeseburger to an apple, contains some kind of hormones. So this paper was really nice. They published it back in 2009 now, and they looked at milk in the grocery store in the 48 contiguous states in the USA. And interestingly, they actually found higher estrogen and progesterone in the organic milk compared to the conventional milk. So the whole premise that organic has no hormones, organic actually has more hormones than conventional. Now, as to whether that would make any human health difference whatsoever, no, I don't think it would. It went from tiny, tiny, tiny quantity to tiny quantity plus a tiny little bit more, you know? But the supposition that system X dairy has no hormones and system Y dairy does absolutely isn't true. All dairy contains hormones, regardless of the system that it comes from. But also, on a global basis, 100 million women every single day take a teeny tiny little pill. And I really hate to be sexist here, but all the people that I've talked to who are concerned about dairy hormones are female, and generally between the age of 20 and 60 or so, you know? So many of us take these teeny tiny little pills, and they contain 35,000 nanograms of estrogen. Whereas ice cream, a serving of 3 ounces, 75 grams, so a little scoop about that big kind of thing, contains 520 nanograms of estrogen. So for any females out there that are concerned about hormones in dairy, to equal the amount in one teeny little pill, you've got to eat 5.7 kilos of ice cream every single day. I mean, ice cream's fabulous. I love ice cream, but I mean, that's a hell of a bucket of ice cream, isn't it? You know, it's not even conceivable. And ice cream, of course, is high in fat and therefore is higher in hormones than actual milk. So if we translate that back, that's something like, I don't know, 12 kilos of milk per day or even more than that. I mean, that's a lot of dairy. Now, all foods contain hormones, and dairy does have hormones in it, and that's absolutely true and that's absolutely fine. But we've got to put it into context for the consumer. Which leads me to my favourite picture of all pictures ever. And again, all systems are good, they really are. But I saw this advertisement, and it's from a co-op called Organic Valley that, again, is in the States. And it's the cleverest marketing I think I've ever seen, because there's no data there, there's no actual claims or stats or anything else. But we have the cow and the pig and the sheep, the ruby slippers here, Oz in the background, pesticides, hormones and drugs, oh my. The implication being, if we don't drink this particular milk, all of the other conventional milk out there is laden with hormones and drugs and pesticides and goodness knows what else. As I showed earlier, we actually see more hormones in the organic milk versus the conventional milk. But again, all systems are good, but mismarketing like this makes me really, really, really cross. I mean, so cross I can't even tell you. But there's a paper that we published back in 2008 now, and we did a little kind of add-on at the back, and we looked at going out to the year 2040. So in the year 2040, the US population is going to have about 350 million people, which is an increase from about 318 now. So to make all of their daily milk, which is a serving of 24 ounces, which is 1.5 pounds, which is about 3/4 kilo of milk per person per day, from a totally organic dairy herd, it can be done. But they need 1.6 million more cattle, i.e. a 25% increase, because in general, organic milk yields per cow are about 20% lower compared to conventional. We need a 30% increase in total land, both because of the decrease in productivity, but also the tendency for cows on pasture to have lower yields, and also the relative yields of pasture land compared to crop land, and we'd see a 13% increase in the total carbon emissions from dairy. Organic is also a fabulous choice. Please don't go away thinking organic is bad. There is a place for every single system, and if there's a market for that system, people will buy it and all is good. But let's not bash other systems, or mine must be better based on things that aren't true. We've got to apply the science to it. And we've got to help the consumer understand the consequences of the various choices, because there's so much data out there, and in fact I was sent some data from here recently that shows that consumers really care about price and safety and the expiry date and the taste. You know, they don't really think about the hormones. They don't even understand hormones most of the time. And they see organic and they think it must be better, but they don't actually know what that term really means. still less do they understand any of the consequences of going from system A to system B or system B to system C. So with that, I believe that in any system, whether you're organic, whether you're conventional, big, small, Holstein, Jersey, Ayrshire, whatever it might be, we can all learn from each other. And in any system, if you improve productivity, if you improve milk yield, components, if you cut cow body weight, if you improve age at first calving, mastitis, lameness, all of these things which impact on our productivity and on our efficiency every single day. If all of our cows perform like our best cow, basically, we can cut greenhouse gas emissions, land, water, carbon, and have a positive economic impact too. And if we combine that with educating the consumer on the social aspects, we can have a dairy industry going forward 10 years, 20, 30 years, and it can be an eminently sustainable industry. How do we do that? Well, it's not easy. We've got to discuss things with the consumers. We've got to talk to those crazy people in town who don't even know what a cow is and see a brown cow and think it gives us chocolate milk. I mean, there are those people out there, and we actually have to talk to them, and I'm sorry to say that, but we do, because as a dairy industry, as a global dairy industry, we're really good at talking to each other and talking to our vets and talking to our cows. We're not that good at going out and talking to the random people who don't understand our industry at all. But in a way, what makes it easier is we all share the common values. We care about our kids and our grandkids. We care about the land and the air, the water. We care about animal welfare every day, and we care about the economic cost. We care if the cost of food goes up or goes down. So we do share values with the consumer, and we've got to help them understand that ultimately we are people like them. We have the same concerns that they do every single day. This was a picture I put on Facebook when my daughter was 2 months old now. So this is about 2.5 years ago now. And I posted it thinking it would be liked or shared by, 3 of my dairy friends, and it got like hundreds and hundreds of shares. And it doesn't really say anything, it just says thank you to dairy farmers for milk. I mean, that's basically all it says. But it's a picture of what I think is a relatively cute baby and some text, and it's out there on the internet. And people like pictures, they like video clips, they particularly like pictures of cute calves. I have a friend on Facebook who's a dairy farmer in Wisconsin. They have about 100 cows, Jersey and Montbéliard crosses, and she posts pictures of these newborn cows, and they get liked and shared by thousands of people because the calves are just so amazingly cute that all the consumers out there who know nothing about dairy at all just go, look at the little baby, it's so gorgeous. So we can have a really positive social impact, even if on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, even if all we do is post cute pictures of the cattle on our operations and then answer questions about why is that calf on straw as opposed to in a pasture, or is that a boy or a girl, or so on and so on. We can make a connection with the consumer every day. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much. You've got my email address here. There's a copy of the presentation as a PDF at that link right there. Obviously, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. And I've got a blog at bobidiva.com where I rant about things that irritate me. I should be posting 87 times a day, but it isn't that often. And happy to answer questions if we've got any time. We might have like 1 minute. So with that, thank you so much.